The blood on her hands had dried to rust by the time Nora Calloway stumbled into Llano, Texas, just after dawn on a scorching July morning in 1882. Her dress torn and her bare feet leaving crimson prints on the dusty Main Street as the first shopkeepers emerged to sweep their porches and froze at the sight of her. She collapsed against a hitching post outside the general store, her chest heaving, her dark hair matted with sweat and worse things she did not want to remember. The storekeeper's wife screamed. Men came running. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered around the wild-eyed young woman who looked like she had crawled out of her own grave. And when the sheriff arrived, hooking his thumbs into his belt and studying her with the hard skepticism of a man who had seen every kind of lie the frontier could produce, Nora tried to tell them what had happened. "The Hartley place," she gasped, her voice raw. "Everyone's dead, all of them. You have to believe me." Sheriff Dawson exchanged glances with his deputy, a thick-necked man named Pike who scratched his jaw and shook his head slowly. The Hartley Ranch sat 15 miles northwest of Llano, a prosperous spread owned by Marcus Hartley and his extended family. Respectable people, church-going people, the kind of folks who did not just turn up massacred. "Now, miss," Dawson said in the patronizing tone men used when they thought women were hysterical. "Why don't you calm yourself down and tell us what really happened? You run off from your husband, get into some kind of trouble." "I am not married," Nora said, her fingers gripping the weathered wood of the hitching post so hard her knuckles went white. "I was traveling through, and my wagon broke an axle on the road. Mr. Hartley offered me shelter for the night. I should have kept walking. I should have slept under the stars, but I did not, and now they are all dead and something is still out there." "Something?" Pike snorted. "What something?" Nora's eyes, green as bottled glass and just as sharp, fixed on him. "I do not know what it was. It came after midnight. I heard screaming. I hid in the root cellar. When it got quiet, I waited until first light and ran. But I saw them. I saw what was left," the crowd murmured. A woman clutched her shawl tighter. Dawson's expression hardened into granite. "You are saying some creature killed the Hartleys? Not a person, but a creature." "I am saying I do not know what it was, only that no person could have done what I saw. No sane person." "Sounds like a tall tale to me," Dawson said. "Sounds like maybe you had something to do with whatever happened out there, if anything happened at all, and now you are trying to spin some wild story to cover your tracks." Nora's laugh was bitter and broken. "Why would I run here? Why would I come straight to you if I had done something wrong?" "Guilt makes people do strange things," Pike offered. "Makes them confess in roundabout ways. I am not confessing to anything because I did not do anything except survive." Nora's voice cracked, and she hated herself for it, hated the tears that burned in her eyes. She had not cried in that cellar, had not cried as she ran through 15 miles of scrubland with thorns tearing her feet and the sun beginning its merciless climb. She would not cry now in front of these men who had already decided she was either a liar or a murderess. That was when Owen Lancaster rode into town. He was a tall man, lean and sun-darkened, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of a winter sky. He sat his buckskin horse like he had been born in the saddle, and when he dismounted outside the saloon and saw the commotion, he walked over with the easy, rolling gait of someone who had spent more time on horseback than on his own 2 feet. He wore a dusty brown hat, a blue shirt faded nearly white from washing, and a gun belt that looked well used but not showy. There was something quiet about him, something that made people step aside when he approached. "What is going on?" he asked, his voice a low drawl that carried authority without demanding it. "Nothing that concerns you, Lancaster," Dawson said, but there was less confidence in his tone now. Just a crazy woman telling crazy stories. Owen's gaze moved to Nora, and something shifted in his expression. Not pity exactly. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who knew what it was like to tell the truth and have no one believe it. "What kind of stories?" he asked. "She claims everyone at the Hartley ranch is dead," Pike said, clearly expecting Owen to laugh along with the rest of them. "Says some monster did it. Came into town covered in blood, spinning tales." Owen did not laugh. He stepped closer to Nora, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her torn dress and bleeding feet. "Is that true?" he asked her directly. "The Hartleys are dead." Nora met his gaze and saw something there she had not seen in any of the other faces. He was actually listening, actually waiting for her answer. "Yes," she said. "I swear it on my life." "And you do not know what killed them?" "No." "But it was not human. Or if it was not sane." Owen turned to Dawson. "Then someone should ride out there and check." "I am not wasting my time on some hysterical woman's nightmare," Dawson said. "She probably killed them herself if they are even dead." "She weighs maybe 110 pounds soaking wet," Owen said mildly. "Marcus Hartley was twice that and meaner than a rattlesnake when riled. His sons were both grown men. You really think she took on the whole family in one? Maybe she poisoned them." "Then why would she be covered in blood?" Dawson's jaw worked. He did not have a good answer for that. "I will ride out there," Owen said. "See what is what. If she is lying, we will know soon enough. If she is telling the truth, you will have wasted a day doubting her while whatever did it gets farther away." "And what business is it of yours, Lancaster?" Pike demanded. "You are not the law." "No," Owen agreed. "But I am a decent human being which seems to be in short supply this morning. And I know the Hartleys. If something has happened to them, they deserve better than to be left to rot because the sheriff could not be bothered to check." The crowd was murmuring now, and Dawson knew he had lost them. With a curse, he jerked his head toward his deputy. "Fine. Pike, get the horses. We will ride out there. But when this turns out to be nothing, I am locking her up for wasting my time." "I am coming too," Owen said. "Like hell you are. You just said I am not the law, which means you have got no authority to stop me from riding wherever I please. The Hartley place is not on your land." Dawson looked like he wanted to argue, but he just spat into the dirt and stalked toward the sheriff's office. Pike followed, grumbling under his breath. Owen turned back to Nora. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 26 or 27. There was gray in his eyes, though, the kind that came from seeing hard things. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes." "Good, you are coming with us. The sheriff will not like that." "The sheriff can go to hell. If you are telling the truth, you are the only witness. And if something is still out there, I would rather have you where I can see you than leaving you here alone." It was the first time since she had stumbled into town that anyone had spoken to her like she was a person instead of a problem. Nora felt something loosen in her chest, just a fraction. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Owen's expression was unreadable. "Because I know what it is like when no one believes you. And because you have got the look of someone telling the truth. Even if it is a truth, nobody wants to hear." He went to his horse and came back with a canteen, which he handed to her. The water was warm and tasted like leather, but Nora drank it like it was salvation. Then Owen pulled a spare pair of boots from his saddlebag, old and too big, but better than nothing. "Put these on," he said. "Your feet are torn up bad enough already." By the time Dawson and Pike returned with their horses, and a third mount for Nora, Owen had helped her into the oversized boots and found her a shawl from a sympathetic woman in the crowd to cover her torn dress. Nora climbed onto the borrowed horse with her back straight and her chin up, refusing to show how much her body ached, how little she had slept, How terrified she was of riding back to that cursed place. But Owen rode beside her, close enough that their stirrups nearly touched, and somehow that made it bearable. The ride to the Hartley ranch took 3 hours under the brutal Texas sun. No one spoke much. Dawson and Pike rode ahead, their skepticism written in every line of their bodies. Owen stayed beside Nora, occasionally passing her the canteen or adjusting his hat to give her more shade. She noticed he kept his hand near his revolver, his eyes scanning the horizon like he expected trouble. When they crested the last rise and the Hartley ranch came into view, Dawson reined in his horse so hard the animal danced sideways. The ranch was a slaughterhouse. The front door hung open, splintered off its hinges. Dark stains painted the porch. Flies swarmed in black clouds. Even from a distance, the smell hit them and Pike turned green and nearly lost his breakfast. "Jesus Christ," Dawson breathed. Nora closed her eyes. She had hoped irrationally that maybe it had all been some nightmare brought on by fever or exhaustion. But no, it was real. It was all horribly real. Owen dismounted first, drawing his gun. "Stay here," he told Nora, his voice gentle but firm. "I already saw it once," she said. "I can see it again. That does not mean you should." But she dismounted anyway, her legs shaking, and followed the 3 men toward the house. Dawson and Pike had drawn their weapons too now, their earlier arrogance replaced by grim determination. Inside was worse than Nora remembered. Marcus Hartley lay in the front room, his throat torn open. His wife was crumpled near the hearth. Their 2 sons were in the kitchen, one slumped over the table, the other on the floor in a pool of congealed blood. A daughter and her husband, visiting from Austin, were in one of the bedrooms. The baby was in its cradle, mercifully untouched but long dead from neglect and dehydration. 7 people. An entire family wiped out in a single night. Pike staggered outside and vomited. Dawson stood in the middle of the carnage, his face ashen. Only Owen seemed able to move, kneeling beside the bodies, studying them with a cattleman's practical eye. "What could do this?" Dawson asked, his voice hollow. "I do not know," Owen said, "but look at the wounds. These are not gunshots, these are not knife wounds, these are tears. Like something ripped into them with claws or teeth." "Mountain lion," Pike suggested weakly from the doorway. "No mountain lion attacks a house full of people. And look." Owen pointed to the doorframe where deep gouges ran through the wood. "Whatever did this was strong. Stronger than any animal I have ever seen." Dawson turned to Nora, and for the first time there was no suspicion in his eyes, only horror and shame. "You were telling the truth," he said. "Yes," Nora said quietly, "I was. And you hid in the cellar." "Yes." "I heard the screaming start and I ran for the cellar. I locked myself in and waited. I thought about coming out to help, but I had no weapon, and I could hear it moving through the house. I could hear it breathing. When it finally got quiet, I waited until I saw light through the cellar door cracks, and then I ran. I did not stop running until I reached Llano." Owen stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "We need to bury these people. And we need to track whatever did this before it kills again. Track it." Pike looked terrified. "You want to go after that thing? You want to wait for it to come to Llano?" Owen asked. "Because if it killed here, it will kill again. That is what predators do." Dawson swallowed hard. "We need more men. We need to go back to town and get a posse together. By the time we do that, the trail will be cold. It has already been nearly 12 hours. Lancaster, I cannot track something I cannot even identify." "Then it is a good thing I can track," Owen said. He looked at Nora. "Did you see which direction it went?" She shook her head. "I did not see it at all, I only heard it." "What did it sound like?" Nora closed her eyes, remembering. "Heavy. It moved heavy like something large, and it made a sound when it breathed like it was struggling for air. wheezing almost. Owen nodded slowly. "All right, that is something." He turned to Dawson. "You and Pike bury these folks. I will see if I can pick up a trail." "And what about her?" Dawson asked, gesturing to Nora. "She comes with me." "The hell she does. That is too dangerous. And leaving her here with 2 corpses and the thing that made them is safer." Owen's voice was hard now. "She comes with me. End of discussion." Dawson did not argue. Maybe he was too shaken. Maybe he just recognized the steel in Owen's voice that said there would be no negotiating. Either way, he nodded and began the grim work of carrying bodies outside. Owen and Nora walked the perimeter of the ranch, Owen's eyes on the ground. He moved slowly, methodically, occasionally kneeling to examine a print or a broken branch. Nora watched him work, fascinated despite her exhaustion. "You are good at this," she said. "I have had practice. Used to track cattle thieves for the ranchers around here. Before that, I scouted for the army for a while. You were a soldier for a few years, long enough to learn I did not like taking orders." He crouched beside a patch of disturbed earth. "Here, look at this." Nora knelt beside him. There in the dry dirt was a print unlike anything she had ever seen. It was vaguely human in shape, but far too large, with elongated toes that ended in what looked like claw marks. "What is that?" she whispered. "I do not know," Owen admitted, "but it headed northwest toward the hills. And from the depth of these prints, whatever it is heavy. Maybe 300–400 pounds. You believe in monsters, Mr. Lancaster." He looked at her, and there was something almost sad in his eyes. "I believe the world is stranger than most people want to admit. I have seen things in my time that did not make sense. Things that should not exist, but they did, and people died because others refused to believe until it was too late." He stood, offering her his hand. "So yes, Miss Calloway, I believe you, and I will help you stop this thing, whatever it is." Nora took his hand, his palm rough and warm against hers, and let him pull her to her feet. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt something other than terror. She felt hope. They returned to the house, where Dawson and Pike had wrapped the bodies and were digging graves in the hard Texas earth. It would take them hours. Owen helped for a while, his shirt soon soaked with sweat, and Nora fetched water from the well and did what she could to assist. When 7 graves finally yawned open beneath the merciless afternoon sun, they laid the Hartley family to rest with nothing but a few words from Dawson, who was not much for scripture. "We should get back to town before dark," Pike said nervously, eyeing the horizon. "You two go," Owen said. "I am going to follow that trail while I still can." "You will get yourself killed," Dawson said. "Maybe, but someone has to do something. And she is going with you." Owen glanced at Nora. "That is up to her. I will take her back to Llano if she wants, but I am not stopping my hunt." Nora thought about returning to town, to the suspicious stares and whispered accusations. She thought about sitting in some boarding house room, waiting to hear if Owen had died tracking the thing that had killed 7 people. She thought about spending the rest of her life wondering if she could have helped. "I am going with you," she said. "Miss Calloway," Dawson started, but she cut him off. "I am 22 years old, Sheriff, and I have been taking care of myself for a long time. I am not some delicate flower who needs protecting. I survived that house when no one else did, and I can survive whatever comes next." Owen's mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. "All right then. We will need supplies from the house, whatever is still usable." They loaded Owen's saddlebags with dried meat, hardtack, and ammunition from the Hartley stores. Nora found a split skirt and blouse that had belonged to the daughter and changed into them, finally free of her torn and blood-stained dress. She also found a small revolver in one of the bedrooms, which Owen helped her load and showed her how to fire properly. "You ever shoot before?" he asked, once or twice. "My father taught me when I was young." "Where is your father now?" "Dead. 5 years ago, my mother too." "I am sorry." "So am I." Dawson and Pike rode back to Llano as the sun began to sink, casting everything in shades of gold and amber. Owen and Nora headed northwest, following the tracks into the rocky hills where the scrub grew sparse and the heat shimmered off the stones like water. They rode in silence for a while, the horses picking their way carefully over the uneven ground. Nora found herself studying Owen when she thought he was not looking. There was something about him that felt solid, dependable. In a world that had revealed itself to be far more dangerous and strange than she had ever imagined, he was an anchor. "Why did you believe me?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. "Back in town. Everyone else thought I was crazy or lying, but you believed me. Why?" Owen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the trail ahead. "When I was 19, he said finally, "I was scouting for the army down near the border. We were tracking a group of bandits who had been raiding settlements, found their camp one morning, and every single one of them was dead. Torn apart, just like the Hartleys. We tried to tell the captain that something else was out there, something dangerous, but he would not hear it. Said it was probably a rival gang or wild animals, or that we were just green and spooked. Refused to investigate further. What happened? 3 nights later, it hit our camp. Killed 5 men before we drove it off. I never got a good look at it, just shadows and teeth and screaming. But I learned 2 things that night. First, that there are things in this world that do not fit into neat categories. And second, that when someone tells you they have seen something impossible, you had better listen, because ignoring them can get people killed. What happened to the thing that attacked your camp? We tracked it into a canyon and collapsed the entrance with dynamite. I do not know if we killed it or just trapped it. I do not know what it was, but I know it was real and I know what it could do. Nora shivered despite the heat. Do you think it is the same thing? No, that was 15 years ago and 500 miles south. But I think the world is bigger and stranger than we know. And there are things in the wild places that have not been catalogued or studied or explained. Things that only come out when they are hungry or angry or something drives them out of hiding. They made camp that night in a small canyon, building a fire against the rocks to hide the light. Owen insisted on taking the first watch, and Nora was too exhausted to argue. She lay on the hard ground with Owen's bedroll under her and his coat over her, and fell into a sleep haunted by screaming and the sound of heavy breathing in the dark. She woke to Owen shaking her shoulder gently. "Your turn," he said. "Wake me if you hear anything, anything at all." "I do not know what to listen for. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." He lay down near the fire, his gun within easy reach, and within minutes his breathing had evened out into sleep. Nora sat with her back to the rocks, the small revolver in her lap, and watched the darkness beyond their little circle of firelight. The night was full of sounds: coyotes yipping in the distance, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the wind sighing through the canyon. Every sound made her heart race. Every shadow made her grip the gun tighter, but nothing came for them that night. When the sky began to lighten, Owen woke on his own as if his body had an internal clock. He made coffee over the fire, strong and bitter, and they shared a breakfast of hardtack and jerky that was tough enough to require serious chewing. "We will reach the hills proper today," Owen said, studying the landscape. "The tracks are heading into rougher country. We need to be careful. If this thing has a lair, it will be up there somewhere. What happens when we find it? We kill it. Just like that?" Owen met her eyes. "Do you have a better idea?" Nora did not. She just knew that she could not let this thing continue to exist, could not let it kill anyone else the way it had killed the Hartleys. If that made her vengeful, so be it. She had earned the right to vengeance. They rode deeper into the hills, following the tracks that Owen somehow managed to read in the rocky soil. Nora had no idea how he did it to her. One stone looked like any other stone. But Owen moved with confidence, occasionally dismounting to examine something more closely, then swinging back into the saddle and adjusting their course. Around midday, they found another sign. A dead deer, or what was left of one. It had been torn apart with the same savage violence as the Hartleys, and flies covered it in a living blanket. Fresh, Owen said grimly. Maybe 2 days old. It is still hunting in this area. That is good, right? It means we are getting close. It also means we are in its territory now. We need to be ready for anything. They continued on, climbing higher into the hills where the air grew marginally cooler and the vegetation gave way to bare rock. The silence here was oppressive, broken only by the clop of hooves and the creak of leather. Even the birds seemed to have abandoned this place. It was Nora who spotted the cave. A dark opening in the hillside, partially hidden by a tumble of boulders. She pointed and Owen nodded, his expression grim. That is it, he said. That has to be it. They dismounted and tied the horses to a scrubby tree a safe distance away. Owen checked his revolver, his rifle, the knife at his belt. Nora clutched her smaller gun, her palms sweating. When we go in there, Owen said quietly, stay behind me. If something happens, if this goes wrong, you run. You get on your horse and you ride back to Llano and you tell them what happened here. Do not try to be a hero, just survive. What about you? I will do what needs doing. Before Nora could respond, before she could tell him that she had no intention of leaving him to face this thing alone, a sound echoed from the cave. A low, wheezing breath that raised every hair on the back of her neck. It was in there, waiting. Owen raised his rifle and stepped toward the cave entrance. Nora followed, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. The darkness inside was absolute, and Owen pulled a torch from his pack, striking a match to light it. The flames cast dancing shadows on the cave walls, revealing bones scattered across the floor. Animal bones, mostly. But Nora saw what might have been a human femur among them and had to swallow down bile. The cave went back farther than the torchlight could reach, sloping downward into the earth. The wheezing sound came again, echoing strangely, making it impossible to tell exactly where it originated. Stay close, Owen murmured. They moved deeper, step by careful step. The cave walls were slick with moisture despite the dry heat outside, and the air smelled of rot and animal musk. Nora kept her finger on the trigger of her revolver, trying to watch every shadow at once. Then the wheezing stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the sound had been. Owen froze, the torch held high, his rifle at his shoulder. Nora could hear her own breathing, ragged and too loud. Something moved in the darkness beyond the torchlight, something massive. Owen, Nora whispered. I see it. The creature that emerged from the depths of the cave was nothing Nora could have imagined in her worst nightmares. It walked upright like a man but hunched forward, its arms too long, its fingers ending in curved claws. Its skin was pale and hairless, stretched tight over knotted muscles. The face was the worst part, almost human, but twisted and wrong, with eyes that reflected the torchlight like an animal's and a mouth full of broken, jagged teeth. It saw them and screamed, a sound of pure rage that echoed through the cave like thunder. Owen fired. The rifle shot was deafening in the enclosed space, and Nora saw the bullet strike the creature's shoulder, saw dark blood spray. But it did not go down. It charged. Owen fired again and again, each shot hitting home but barely slowing the thing. Nora raised her revolver with shaking hands and pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly knocked the gun from her grip, but she saw the creature flinch as her bullet hit its chest. Then it was on them. Owen threw the torch at it and dove to the side, pulling Nora with him. The creature stumbled over the fallen torch, and flames caught on something old dried grass or animal dung and began to spread. In the growing light, Nora could see just how huge the thing was, easily 7 feet tall and massively built. Owen had drawn his knife and was slashing at it, trying to drive it back, but those long arms gave it reach, and one swipe of its claws sent him sprawling. Nora screamed and fired again, aiming for its head. The bullet grazed its skull, and it turned on her with that terrible, intelligent fury in its eyes. She knew she was going to die. The certainty of it was ice in her veins. But then Owen was there, tackling the creature from behind, driving his knife into its back over and over. The creature thrashed, trying to dislodge him, its claws raking his arm and leaving bloody furrows. The fire was spreading now, filling the cave with smoke. Nora could barely breathe, could barely see. She fired her last shots into the creature's torso, and finally, it stumbled. Fell to its knees. Owen drove his knife into the base of its skull, and with one last rattling wheeze it collapsed. "Move!" Owen shouted, grabbing Nora's hand. "The cave is going to fill with smoke." They ran, stumbling over bones and rocks, the smoke chasing them. Behind them, the fire roared, consuming everything. They burst out of the cave into blessed daylight, coughing and gasping, and did not stop running until they reached the horses. Only then did Nora see how badly Owen was hurt. His arm was shredded, bleeding freely, and he was pale beneath his tan. "Sit down," she ordered, her nurse's instincts from helping her mother care for the sick in their small town kicking in. "Now." Owen sank down against a rock, and Nora tore strips from her blouse to bind his wounds. Her hands were steady now, steady in a way they had not been in the cave. This she knew how to do, this she could control. "We got it," Owen said, his voice hoarse. "We actually got it. We nearly got killed, but we did not, and it will not hurt anyone else." Nora tied off the makeshift bandage and sat back, her own hands shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. Owen reached out with his good hand and caught one of hers, his fingers warm and solid. "You did good in there," he said. "You did not run, you fought." "I was terrified." Brave is not about not being scared. Brave is being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. They sat there for a long moment, hands clasped, watching smoke pour from the cave entrance. Eventually, the fire would burn itself out and the cave would collapse, sealing the creature's corpse inside. But for now it was over. The monster was dead. Nora had survived. They both had. "We should head back to Llano," Owen said finally. "Get this arm looked at properly. Can you ride? I have ridden with worse." He stood, swaying only slightly, and helped Nora to her feet. "Come on. We have got a long ride ahead of us." The journey back to Llano took 2 days. Owen's arm grew hot and swollen despite Nora's best efforts to keep the wounds clean, and by the time they rode into town, he was fever-sick and barely staying in the saddle. Nora got him to the doctor, a grizzled old man named Perkins who took one look at the claw marks and whistled low. "What in God's name did that?" he asked. "Something that will not hurt anyone else," Nora said firmly. "Can you help him?" "I will do my best, but these are deep." "He is going to have scars." "Scars are fine. Just keep him alive." Perkins worked through the night, cleaning and stitching the wounds while Owen drifted in and out of consciousness. Nora sat beside the bed, holding Owen's good hand, willing him to fight the fever the way he had fought the creature. She told him stories, though she did not know if he could hear her. Told him about her childhood, her parents, the little house they had lived in before the fever took them both. Told him about the wandering years after, trying to find a place to belong. Told him that he was the first person in a long time who had made her feel like maybe she was not meant to be alone. On the third day, the fever broke. Owen opened his eyes, clear and focused, and saw Nora asleep in the chair beside him, her head pillowed on her arms next to his bed. "Nora," he said, his voice rough from disuse. She jerked awake, and when she saw him looking at her, really looking at her, her face crumpled with relief. "You are back," she said. "I thought I was going to lose you." "Takes more than some overgrown cave dweller to kill me," he said, but his smile was gentle. "How long was I out?" "3 days. The fever was bad. You stayed." "Of course I stayed. Where else would I go?" Owen's hand tightened on hers. "Anywhere. You are free now, Nora. That thing is dead. You do not owe me anything." "Is that what you think, that I am here out of obligation?" "I do not know why you are here." Nora took a breath, gathering her courage. "I am here because in the worst moment of my life, you were the only person who believed me. You were the only one who saw me as a person instead of a problem or a victim. You risked your life to help me, and I will not walk away from that. I will not walk away from you." Something shifted in Owen's expression, something warm and wondering. "Nora, you do not have to say anything," she said quickly. "I just needed you to know, needed you to understand that I am not staying because I have nowhere else to go. I am staying because I want to be here, with you." Owen sat up slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches, but he did not let go of her hand. "I have been alone a long time," he said quietly. "After I left the army, I just drifted, town to town, job to job, never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. Never let anyone get close enough to matter. But then you stumbled into Llano covered in blood and terror, and something in me woke up. Something I thought I had buried. What was that? The need to protect something worth protecting. The desire to be more than just a drifter. The hope that maybe I could be the kind of man someone like you might want to know." Nora felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, hopeful tears. "Owen Lancaster, I know exactly what kind of man you are. You are brave and kind, and you believed me when no one else would. You are more than worth knowing." He reached up with his good hand and cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Then stay," he said. "Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to. Stay in Llano. Give this place a chance. Give me a chance." "Yes," she said simply. "Yes." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, and Nora felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like home. The months that followed were not easy. Llano was a small town with a long memory, and there were those who never quite believed Nora's story, who whispered that she and Owen had cooked up some scheme to steal the Hartley land, or that she was a witch who had summoned demons. But there were others, more with each passing week, who saw the scars on Owen's arm and the way he and Nora looked at each other, and decided that sometimes truth was stranger than fiction. Sheriff Dawson, to his credit, came to Nora and apologized for not believing her sooner. "I was wrong," he said simply, "and I am sorry. If I had listened, maybe we could have stopped it sooner." "It is over now," Nora said. "That is what matters." Owen recovered slowly, his arm healing into thick white scars that he wore with quiet pride. He took a job as a ranch foreman for a spread outside town, work he knew and was good at. Nora found work as well, helping the town's only seamstress and occasionally assisting Doc Perkins when someone needed medical care. It was honest work, respectable work, and it gave her a place in the community. She and Owen courted properly, with Sunday dinners and walks along the creek and long conversations under the stars. They talked about everything and nothing: his time in the army, her memories of her parents, dreams for the future, fears about the past. Owen told her about the loneliness of drifting, and Nora told him about the terror of being utterly alone after her parents died. They learned each other slowly, carefully, building something solid and true. 6 months after the creature's death, Owen asked Nora to marry him. They were sitting on the porch of the small house he rented on the edge of town, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He did not have a ring, just his hand in hers and hope in his eyes. "I am not a rich man," he said, "and I cannot promise you an easy life, but I can promise that I will believe you always, that I will stand by you no matter what comes, that I will love you for as long as I draw breath and probably beyond that too. So what do you say, Nora Calloway? Will you take a chance on a used-up cowboy with more scars than sense?" Nora laughed, a sound full of joy and relief and certainty. "You are not used up, Owen Lancaster. You are just getting started. And yes, I will marry you. 1,000 times yes." They were married in the small church in Llano on a bright October morning in 1883. Doc Perkins gave Nora away, and Sheriff Dawson stood as Owen's best man in a gesture of reconciliation and respect. The whole town turned out, curiosity overcoming suspicion, and by the end of the ceremony, even the hardest hearts had softened at the sight of the scarred cowboy and the brave young woman who had survived the impossible. Owen and Nora bought a small piece of land outside town, just 20 acres with a creek running through it. It was not much, but it was theirs. They built a house together, Owen doing the heavy work and Nora handling the details that made it a home. They planted a garden and raised chickens and bought a few head of cattle. It was simple, honest work, and they were happy. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch the sunset, and sometimes Nora would think about that terrible night at the Hartley ranch and the desperate run to Llano. She would think about how close she had come to dying, how close she had come to never knowing this life, this love. And then Owen would take her hand, his scarred fingers intertwining with hers, and she would be grateful for every moment that had led her here. Their first child came in the spring of 1885, a boy they named James after Owen's father. He was a healthy baby with Owen's gray eyes and Nora's dark hair, and he brought a joy to their little house that neither of them had quite expected. Owen proved to be a devoted father, patient and gentle in ways that surprised people who only knew him as the tough, scarred cowboy. Nora watched him cradle their son and sing off-key lullabies and felt her heart swell with love. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, Catherine, named for Nora's mother. She was small and fierce from the moment she was born, screaming her displeasure at the world with impressive volume. "She has got your spirit," Owen told Nora, and she laughed and agreed. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Owen's reputation as an honest, hard worker spread, and he found himself with more job offers than he could accept. Nora's sewing business flourished, and she became known for her skill with a needle and her fair prices. They were not wealthy, but they were secure, and that was more than either of them had ever expected. The story of the Hartley Ranch creature faded into local legend, one of those tales people told to scare children or entertain visitors. Some believed it, some did not. Nora and Owen never spoke of it publicly, but sometimes, on quiet evenings after the children were asleep, they would talk about it, about the terror and the courage and the moment when two strangers became partners against the darkness. You ever wonder what it was? Nora asked one such evening years after the fact. "That creature." "Sometimes," Owen admitted. "Doc Perkins had a theory that it might have been a man once, someone afflicted with some disease that changed them, made them into something else. You believe that? I do not know. Maybe. Or maybe there really are monsters in the world, things that do not fit into neat categories, things that exist in the spaces between what we know and what we can explain. He looked at her, his expression serious. "Does it matter?" "No," Nora said. "I suppose it does not. Whatever it was, it is gone now, and we are here. That is what matters." Owen pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They had built something good here, something worth protecting. A life, a family, a love that had started in blood and terror, but had grown into something beautiful and strong. As the years passed, the scars on Owen's arm faded from angry red to pale white, but they never disappeared entirely. Nora would trace them sometimes, these permanent reminders of the day he had fought a monster to protect her. And Owen would catch her hand and kiss her fingers and remind her that some scars were worth bearing because of what they represented. Their children grew. James became a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and numbers. Catherine was wild and fearless, always climbing trees or chasing after her father when he worked the cattle. In 1889, another son arrived, Thomas, who was calm and sweet-natured from the start. The little house expanded with each addition, growing from 2 rooms to 4, from a simple dwelling to a true family home. Llano grew too. The railroad came through in 1890, bringing new people and new businesses. The town that had once been suspicious of Nora welcomed her as one of their own, a founding member of the community who had survived tragedy and built a good life. She served on the church committee and helped organize town socials, and no one whispered about her anymore except to say what a fine woman she was, and how lucky Owen Lancaster had been to find her. Owen became a pillar of the community as well, respected for his work ethic and his fairness. He served as a deputy sheriff for a few years when Dawson needed help, and young men sought his advice on everything from breaking horses to courting girls. The angry, drifting man who had ridden into Llano all those years ago was gone, replaced by someone with roots and responsibilities and reasons to stay. In 1895, on a warm June evening, Nora and Owen celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary. Their children were playing in the yard, and the house was filled with the smell of the special dinner Nora had prepared. They sat on the porch, the same porch where Owen had proposed all those years ago, and watched the sun set over their land. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked suddenly. "Staying here, marrying me? You could have gone anywhere, done anything, you were free." Nora looked at him in surprise. "Regret? Owen, this is the life I chose. You are the man I chose. Every single day I choose this, and I have never regretted it for a moment, even with how it started. With all that blood and terror, especially because of how it started," she said firmly. "Because you saw me at my worst, my most desperate, and you believed me anyway. You fought for me when you barely knew me. You gave me a reason to hope when I thought hope was gone. How could I ever regret that?" Owen's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining the way they had 1,000 times before. "I love you," he said simply. "I loved you from that first day in Llano when you looked at me like I was the answer to a prayer. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Nora said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "My brave cowboy who believed in monsters and in me." They sat there as the sky darkened and the stars emerged, one by one, like promises being kept. In the yard, their children's laughter rang out, bright and innocent and full of life. Inside the house, the dinner waited, and beyond that, the comfortable bed they shared, and beyond that, years and years still to come. Nora thought about the girl she had been, stumbling into Llano with blood on her hands and terror in her heart. That girl had been broken and alone, a survivor of something that should not have been possible. But Owen had seen past the blood and the terror to the strength beneath. He had given her not just belief but partnership, not just safety but love, and she had taken that gift and built a life with it. A good life, full of simple joys and hard work and the kind of love that sustained you through everything. They had faced down a monster together, but more than that, they had built something together. A home, a family, a future. The children called for them, demanding that their parents come inside for the anniversary dinner. Owen stood first, offering Nora his hand, and she took it, letting him pull her to her feet. They walked inside together, into the warmth and light and laughter of the life they had created. Years continued to pass, each one adding new memories to the tapestry of their life together. James grew into a young man and went east to study law, determined to use his mind to help people. Catherine surprised everyone by becoming a skilled horsewoman and ranch manager, taking over more and more of the day-to-day operations as Owen's joints began to ache with age. Thomas, the baby, showed an unexpected talent for medicine and went to apprentice with Doc Perkins, who was delighted to have a successor. Nora and Owen grew older together, their hair graying, their faces lining with the marks of years and weather and laughter. But the way they looked at each other never changed. There was still that spark, that recognition of two souls who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. In 1903, James returned from the East with a law degree and a wife, a kind young woman named Sarah who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They settled in Llano, and James opened a practice that quickly became successful. Catherine married a rancher from a neighboring county, a good man who respected her strength and shared her love of the land. Thomas completed his medical training and took over Doc Perkins' practice when the old doctor finally retired. Grandchildren arrived, a whole new generation to fill the family home with noise and joy. Nora would sit on the porch and watch Owen teach his grandsons to rope and his granddaughters to ride, and she would marvel at the life they had built. All of this, all these people who existed because one terrible night, a cowboy had chosen to believe a desperate woman's impossible story. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1913, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. 3 children, their spouses, 7 grandchildren, and half the town of Llano turned out to honor Owen and Nora Lancaster. There were speeches and toasts and a dance under the stars, and through it all, Owen and Nora sat together, hands clasped, watching their family with pride and love. Late that night, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Nora and Owen sat alone on their porch one more time. They were old now, in their 60s, with all the aches and pains that came with age. But they were together, and that was all that mattered. 30 years, Owen said, shaking his head in wonder. Seems impossible. Seems like just yesterday you stumbled into town looking like you had seen a ghost. I had seen worse than a ghost, Nora said. But then I found you. We found each other, Owen corrected gently. And we built this life together, every bit of it. You think the young people believe the story? Nora asked. About the creature, some do. Some think it is just a tall tale. Does it matter? No, Nora said, the same answer she had given decades ago. What matters is that we survived. That we found each other. That we made something beautiful out of something terrible. Owen raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, the gesture as tender as it had been on their wedding day. I would do it all again, he said. Every moment, every danger, every hardship. Because it led me to you. And I would run into Llano bleeding and terrified 1,000 times if I knew you would be waiting there to believe me, Nora replied. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the sounds of their land, the cattle lowing in the distance, the creek babbling over rocks, the wind rustling through the trees they had planted together. This was their kingdom, small and simple, but it was everything they had ever wanted. In the years that followed, Owen's health began to decline. The old wounds and a lifetime of hard work caught up with him, and he moved slower, rested more often. But his mind stayed sharp, and his love for Nora never wavered. She cared for him the way she had cared for him all those years ago when fever had nearly taken him, with patience and devotion and fierce determination. Catherine took over the ranch completely, running it with the same skill and integrity her father had shown. James handled the legal affairs, ensuring that everything was in order and the land would stay in the family. Thomas made house calls regularly, checking on his father and doing what he could to ease the inevitable decline. Owen Lancaster died peacefully in his sleep on a warm spring night in 1919, with Nora holding his hand and their children gathered around. He was 64 years old and had lived a full, good life. His last words were to Nora, "Thank you for choosing me." The town of Llano turned out for his funeral, hundreds of people whose lives he had touched in some way. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Owen Lancaster, beloved husband, father, and friend." He believed when others would not. Nora lived another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and strong even in her 70s. She spent her days tending her garden, sewing and telling stories to anyone who would listen. She never remarried, never even considered it. Owen had been her great love, her partner, her proof that even in the darkest moments there could be light. She passed away quietly in her sleep in 1927, just a few months shy of her 71st birthday. They buried her next to Owen under the same spreading oak tree. Her stone was equally simple: Nora Calloway Lancaster, beloved wife, mother, and survivor. She was believed. The ranch stayed in the family, passing down through the generations. The house was expanded and modernized, but the original 2 rooms where Owen and Nora had started their life together were preserved, a small museum of their love. Their great-great-grandchildren would walk through those rooms and touch the furniture they had made, the quilts Nora had sewn, the tools Owen had used, and feel the presence of 2 people who had refused to let darkness win. The story of the Hartley ranch creature became part of local folklore, told and retold until no one was quite sure anymore what was truth and what was embellishment. But the story of Owen and Nora, the cowboy who believed and the woman who survived, that story endured. It was told at weddings and anniversaries, a reminder that love could bloom in the strangest soil, that belief and courage could change everything. In the end, that was their legacy. Not just the land or the children or the successful businesses their family built. Their legacy was the simple, profound truth that sometimes believing in someone, truly believing in them when no one else will, could change the course of a life, could turn a terrified survivor into a beloved matriarch, could transform a drifting cowboy into a pillar of the community, could create something beautiful and lasting out of blood and terror and impossible circumstances. They had escaped the house that no one left alive, but more than that, they had built a life worth living, together, and that made all the difference.